Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Sharika Mason, and I'm a master's level social worker, and I have a license in social work in the state of Illinois. I graduated in 2016, and I have over 6 years of experience working in clinical settings, private practice, OMH settings, case management, nonprofit, educational home care and childcare settings, as well as I work as a mental health consultant. My educational background include having a bachelor's in fine arts from Malloy University. Throughout my career, I have completed a certificate in expressive art and counseling, somatic EMDR, life purpose, and CBT coaching. I would like to say thank you all for joining me today. Please note that we are here in partnership with blackdoctors.org in support of SAMHSA, representing Howard University. Thank you. Next slide, please. The purpose of our presentation and workshop today is aimed at addressing intergenerational trauma within the Brown, Indigenous, and people of color community, using art as a therapeutic tool. Areas of focus include intergenerational trauma within the BIPOC community, knowledge and resources on how to address and treat intergenerational trauma using art, and how trauma affects the community and the body. Next slide, please. Please note that this is a safe space. This presentation could trigger some emotions that may be uncomfortable for most. If for any reason throughout this presentation you have become triggered or upset, please remove yourself and come back when you are ready to return. This is a safe space, and any information shared throughout this time period is private and should not be shared outside to others to ensure and protect everyone's privacy. Please respect one another, and please be mindful of our pronouns. Next slide. Throughout this presentation, I would like for you to think about reflective questions, things that may come up. The first question is, how do you think your own trauma affected how you interact in your daily life? How do you think your intergenerational trauma affects you in the community? When you look in the community, what do you see that reminds you that the community is still dealing with trauma? Also, please take into effect that even though I am not a licensed creative art therapist, some of the images that I will share, they belong to the artist, and my history and background in bachelor's art allows me to present on this topic today. Next slide. So what is intergenerational trauma? And what does intergenerational trauma look like in the BIPOC community? Intergenerational trauma, also known as transgenerational or multi-generational trauma, is the effect of trauma that has been passed down between generations. The impact of intergenerational trauma can affect a person's way of thinking, their emotions, and their behavior. Someone that has experienced intergenerational trauma may have difficulty with effective communication, building healthy connections with family members or their children. Intergenerational trauma can impact a person and their parenting techniques, bonding styles, and they may experience difficulty having healthy, intimate relationships based on their experiences. When dealing with unresolved intergenerational trauma, a person is more likely to repeat and pass on their traumas from one generation to the next, resulting in a generational cycle of repeated trauma. Next. What are some examples of intergenerational trauma? Some examples include colorism, history of slavery, white superiority out in the community and in the workplace, relocation to a new country, cultural factors, poverty, sexism, systematic oppression, racism, sexual physical abuse, rape, social rules of dating, parental incarceration, substance use, distrust of institutions such as healthcare, law enforcement, and the government, mental health, experiencing mental health disparities, higher rates of PTSD and depression, as well as migration, witness to violence, experience to Jim Crow laws, emotional repression, language barriers, limitations, colonialism, and forced assimilation. Examples of intergenerational trauma in the Indigenous BIPOC community when dealing with colorism, that is the prejudice or discrimination against individuals that have darker skin tone. Typically, discrimination comes from people that are from the same ethnic or racial group. When dealing with other areas or examples of intergenerational trauma, a person can also experience natural disasters, flooding, hurricanes. Other issues included not having affordable housing, poor education systems, or opportunities to have accessible education. Other factors include social isolation caused by discrimination or exclusion, living in a household with grandparents or parents who have experienced traumatic events. This exposure produces a higher level of stress, absorbing beliefs related to trauma. Finally, unstable family dynamics, including divorce, abandonment, abuse, or neglect. Next slide. How does relocation and poverty affect intergenerational trauma? Poverty or poverty consciousness is contributed to intergenerational trauma, and that is the feeling of constant threat and fears of not having adequate food, living in unsafe housing, neighborhoods, witnessing violence, poor healthcare access, resulting in prolonged stress. Parents or caregivers living in poverty are often viewed as less consistent in their caretaking roles. The caregivers or parents are viewed as being less nurturing and will have difficulty with emotional attunement and have difficulty absorbing and processing their child in distress or feeling emotionally overwhelmed. This results in the child or children growing up and repeating the cycle of poverty. That is due to the lack of developing appropriate skills during the parent-child relationship. Frequent moving as an adult may unconsciously internalize a sense of impermanence, affecting their decisions and behaviors of residential instability in their own families. This creates an unspoken trauma that can create anxiety, difficulty with change, not feeling like they belong anywhere permanent. This can also create distrust of institutions and authority, and feeling that they are at the mercy of external forces, which can be passed down through generations. Poverty can also become a learned behavior, creating disruptive attachment patterns and the perpetuation of disadvantages in social and economic circumstances. Next. How does colorism affect intergenerational trauma? Colorism affects intergenerational trauma in the BIPOC community. It affects how the skin, or when you look at one's skin, in the community. This colorism was explored in 1982 with writer Alice Walker. She created the term. The term is defined as expressing prejudice or discrimination towards a racial or ethnic group, resulting in favoring people of lighter skin complexion over someone of darker skin complexion. It is the idea that someone of lighter skin is superior to someone of darker skin, and a person with lighter skin are at a greater advantage and is exposed to certain privileges to those of darker skin. This experience of colorism generally observed and witnessed within the BIPOC community. Colorism affects individuals dealing with intergenerational trauma within their family systems. Colorism, when dealing with intergenerational trauma, creates issues with internalized oppression and self-esteem issues. Families will show favoritism to children and other family members of lighter skin tones. These children are often treated better in comparison to other members of the family, such as children of lighter skin tones are told they are often more attractive in comparison, should not get dirty, or dress nicer, and they are often told that their hair is nicer or they have better hair, and will often receive more praise and opportunities from family in comparison to children of darker skin. Children and family members of darker skin are often criticized, feel rejected by their caregivers or family members, feelings of being alienated from family, or being told that they are the other. Children of darker skin tones are told they are ugly, less deserving, and are excluded from activities, will get teased for their skin complexion and their appearance, and are often viewed as less intelligent in comparison to others of lighter skin tones. Children that have experienced issues related to colorism within their home or family will have negative self-talk and difficulty forming healthy relationships due to their colorist views and remarks that were made throughout their childhood. Throughout childhood into adulthood, children that were exposed to negative colorist views will have attention-seeking behavior and will be desperate to seek approval and acceptance and love. Within the parent-child relationship, the child will grow up to have unconscious biases in parenting and continue the cycle of colorism and favoritism with their own children. This can also affect creating emotional bonds to their child or children with different skin tones. Other ways colorism affects intergenerational trauma include creating new coping skills to manage concerns related to self-blame, avoidance, and emotional suppression. There is a narrative of unspoken anxieties, painful memories, and internalized beliefs about skin and how they are being valued. Colorism, when dealing with intergenerational trauma, can create future generations of stress responses and mental health vulnerabilities. This biased views of attractiveness and intelligence is often based and passed down from one generation to the next, resulting in exposure to patterns of internalized negative beliefs, sense of self-worth, understanding of privilege, exposure to self-hatred, feeling of being inferior to families and community members, of individuals that are of lighter skin, and have society views that skin and color beauty standards are unrealistic. The exposure of colorism is evident in today's society when we look in media, television, music videos, and various standards of what is considered beautiful. The makeup that we wear, the makeup that's produced, the skin products that are made. In media, reality shows include Love Island and The Gilded Age. Next, what does intergenerational trauma look like in the community? Intergenerational trauma in the Black, Indigenous, people of color community looks like when we look at lower income neighborhoods, you will often see gentrification, resulting in lower income families being priced out and forced to leave their homes. Overpriced quality foods that is not affordable for lower income families. Schools that have less resources and quality schools that are not affordable or has limited acceptance rates for lower income children. Overpriced quality daycares, childcare centers that has limited voucher acceptance, resulting in poor quality schools to be overcrowded and poorly run. Materials and goods that are not affordable and in neighborhoods have more access to fast food options in lower income households in comparison. Rezoning of neighborhoods and school districts. Other examples of intergenerational trauma in the BIPOC community include experiencing land depossession is often a non-legal way of removing a person from the ownership of their home and their land, especially in an indigenous community. Other examples include loss of spiritual practices, loss of language, and of cultural beliefs. When a family of a community has experienced immigration, intergenerational trauma in the BIPOC community can look like the difficulty of adapting to a new country, thoughts and concerns of leaving behind their homes, family tradition, educational status, forced to start a new life with little to no support, learning a new language, and often feeling displaced. In the BIPOC community, intergenerational trauma can also create a sense of fear in a person when walking around in the community, becoming stigmatized or feeling stigmatized based on the color of their skin. Increased police involvement and having internal systematic beliefs of being oppressed, objectified, and undeserving. Next, I want to share with you a video of what trauma looks like in the brain.
Brainstem, or the reptilian brain as some people might call it. This area is responsible for our bodily functions. It tells us when to regulate our temperature, when to sleep, and when to eat. The next important part of our brains to develop is the limbic system, or what some people might call the mammalian part of the brain. The limbic system supports a variety of functions, including emotion, behavior, motivation, and long-term memory. The next part of the brain to develop is the cortex, which is the outer layer of the brain. This is sometimes considered the human part because humans are one of the only mammals that develop this part of the brain. This part of the brain is responsible for how we as humans were able to develop language, have thoughts, self-awareness, perception, and consciousness. Also, the cortex plays a key role in integrating the central nervous system and functions of memory. The last and most advanced part of the brain to develop is the prefrontal cortex, which is considered the executive functioning part of the brain. For some people, this part doesn't fully develop until they're in their mid to late 20s. The prefrontal cortex helps us to think through cause and effect, the ability to plan for the future, set goals, and understand the consequences of our actions. It's also responsible for the ability to moderate social behavior. When we're in a stressful situation, part of our limbic system called the amygdala sets off an alarm bell response to let us know we're in danger and we need to do something about it. When this happens, the brain floods with a hormone called cortisol, so the body knows that something needs to be done. The most common responses to a stressful or dangerous situation are some you might be familiar with: fight, flight, freeze, or submit. This is an inbuilt system of survival to keep us safe when we're in danger. Like when our ancestors might have had to decide whether to stand their ground and fight against a large predator or run away. A stress response is a healthy, normal part of being a human. It lets us know that our bodies are working and keeping us safe. If a person is exposed to a highly stressful or traumatic event, or they have continual exposure to stressful events like abuse or neglect, their alarm system might become overactive. It might be always switched on, as if there was a risk of danger or threat at all times. For a child, this might affect how their brain develops. This is especially the case if it's in the context of stress or trauma events by a primary caregiver. In these cases, the child might develop an understanding of the world as an unsafe and dangerous place, even when they are in a safe situation. Sometimes this is called hypervigilance. It means being on edge or aware of danger at all times. Being exposed to stressful and traumatic events on a regular basis can also have a significant impact on neural connections in the memory center. It can even change the way we remember actual events. People use alcohol and other drugs for a variety of reasons. When someone's experienced trauma, they might be in a constant state of fight or flight, and so might use substances to help move them out of their stress response state. We also know that substance use can affect the way that our brain functions. Chemicals from substances cross the blood-brain barrier and can either stimulate or depress different parts of the central nervous system, affecting how the person feels, thinks, and acts. Similar to cortisol flooding the brain in the stress response, chemicals from alcohol and other drugs can also affect neural pathways and the way the person might make decisions or remember events. Luckily, neural pathways have the lifelong ability to form and change. You might have heard this referred to as neural plasticity. Through developing a better understanding of the brain and the way trauma and alcohol and other drugs affect neural pathways, clients can be better informed and empowered. This is an intervention itself called psychoeducation.
So what does trauma look like in the body? Next slide, please. In the body, trauma can express itself in various ways. Example of what trauma can and may look like in the body, as discussed in the video, can include a person feeling on edge or feel tension in the body. Unresolved trauma in the body can lead to the feeling of pain and body tremors. When triggered or placed in a triggering situation, a person can also feel their heart racing, having constant sweating, and clenched fists. In the body, a person can also experience an increased likelihood of heart attacks or strokes, have muscle aches, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, and headaches. Other symptoms of trauma in the body is the feeling of fatigue or exhaustion. Sometimes trauma in the body can show itself as having difficulty sleeping or staying asleep, resulting in increased risk of obesity and diabetes and increased risk of cancer. As discussed, the flight, fight, freeze response, it's in stressful situations, the body may also respond in a flight freeze response, a protective factor or coping mechanism when the body's responding to danger or feels as if it is in danger. The fight response in the body can feel like hyperactivity, feeling as if one is bouncing off the walls. The fight response can also show up as verbal aggression, oppositional behavior, limit testing, or physical aggression. The flight response in the body can feel as if one is becoming withdrawn, wanting to escape, wanting to run away from the situation that is upsetting or triggering. One can become self-isolated or avoidant. The freeze response is when the body can become still, looking dazed, disassociating, daydreaming, become forgetful, and will shut down emotionally. The fawn response is a stress response. It's the eagerness to try and please and placate others, violating one's own boundaries to avoid conflict. There's also the flop response, a form of dissociation when triggered by a traumatic situation and becomes overwhelmed. Is a protective mechanism often resulting in a person collapsing, fainting, and becoming unresponsive during triggering situations. So what does art look like? And how do you incorporate art with intergenerational trauma? Art can be described as a century-old universal concept or language of the human expression, the use of imagination and creation to create something meaningful and beautiful. So how does art help with coping with intergenerational trauma? When working with a client or patient, it can be difficult for the individual to either process their emotion, have words for the emotion or the trauma, feel comfortable talking about the trauma, and sometimes other types of therapeutic techniques may not be helpful in these circumstances. With art, it allows a client or patient to have a creative outlet to express their emotions related to the traumatic event in a nonverbal way. Through art, it can be a way for the patient or client to explore ways to tell their story of the events of the traumatic situation. It can provide a judgment-free zone as well as a culturally sensitive environment for the client or patient to interpret their trauma independently from outside influences. Equally, through art, it allows the patient or client to explore ways to change and not repeat the historical traumatic events that happened throughout their lifespan. As, as an effective way to break the cycle of intergenerational trauma through art. However, in a therapeutic setting, a mental health professional, through experience and proper education, can support the patient through the experience when the client or patient is attempting to process the traumatic event. Art also provides a protective way of having a creative way of self-exploration. Through their art, may it be drawing, painting, collage piece, or other art forms. Through art, it can provide a safer way for the client and patient to process their traumatic memories, events, and through imagery, painting, photography, magazines, and drawings. It can allow the patient or client to be able to narrate a traumatic situation, especially when a traumatic event or memory is out of sequence. Art can also allow and provide the client or patient the ability to create a space that used for storytelling. And through art, it can allow the client or patient to explore their history through creative play, exploration of repeated patterns, emotions through color. When using textured materials through art, it can also help trigger memories used for storytelling. Textured materials, especially in the Black, Indigenous, and people of color, is also important and a narrative of cultures and their ancestry. How can various art mediums cope with intergenerational trauma? Throughout art, it can provide a safer way for the client and patient to process their traumatic memories and events through imagery and painting. Different mediums, um, such as photography and magazines, it's like clay, sculpture, similar to other mediums. Clay can be used to create symbolic representation of traumatic experiences or emotions that may be difficult to express directly. This is also a controlled art medium that allows the individual to process the emotion related to the traumatic event in a less triggering or stressful environment. Play is a way of regaining control and safety within one's body. When a person is using clay as an art form to process trauma, the concept of shaping and manipulating the clay can be a powerful way to release unresolved emotions, tensions, and even physical sensations within the body that is associated to the trauma. This can help individuals find a sense of calm and release. Photography for the patient or client, photo can also become a visual record for an event. It is a visual medium that allows a person to explore both positive and negative emotions. Art allows a patient or client to regain control for any traumatic event and provide a sense of healing. Examples of art when exploring intergenerational trauma can include paper, paint, chalk, charcoal, ink, clay, as discussed before, markers, crayons, colored pencils, pictures and photographies, magazine, music, dancing, watercolors, oil pastels, string, yarn, cardboard, and creative writing. Creative writing, another form of self-expression, is used through language play and expressive language and creativity. Collage work is a way for an individual or the client to process healing. It is a mixed medium with different materials included. Collage art can provide a sense of agency for the client or patient and a nonverbal creative outlet that can be used as a sense of storytelling when processing and exploring the traumatic event. All images can be subjective and open for interpretation and description. Other creative forms, such as dancing and music and instruments, drumming and dancing is a physical outlet that can create a sense of belonging, community, shared ways of exploring trauma when dancing or drumming together. The sense of unity, collaboration, security, and unspoken language of shared trauma. Another way of releasing trauma through movement, dancing and drumming provides a space for the patient or client to access and process traumatic memories. Here you'll see a list of artists that are both BPOP and non-BPOP. Please note that I do not have access to their own rights to their artwork. but I wanted to provide a list of artists that are both BIPOC and non-BIPOC and where their art focuses on intergenerational trauma. The image Sorry for the loss in connection. As I was saying before, I will share a list of artists that have used different various art forms to express intergenerational trauma. Please note that I do not own any rights to the artwork that will be shown in the next slides. I wanted to provide a list of artists that are both BIPOC and non-BIPOC, where their art focuses on intergenerational trauma. The images that I will share belong to the respective artists. It is important to share different art mediums from respected artworks. Next slide, please. Once again, I do not own any rights to the artwork. These images belong to the respective artists, but I wanted to share with you 4 artists that have used art and how it reflects in intergenerational trauma. The images that are currently being represented include artists by Myeon Marie Kim. That is on your top left. She is a Korean Canadian artist, and this work explores divorce, immigration, war, loss, grief, shared suffering, poverty, and social culture norms in the Asian heritage. This is a mixed media piece incorporating old family photos, crayons, oil pastels, Korean-made paper, sealed beeswax. Jennifer White is the one in the middle, in the top. She's an Indigenous artist and is a member of the Arikara tribe of North Dakota. This celebrates her Northern Plains native culture. Anthony Young, the one on the top right, he's an African American painter. He uses paint, and this is called Passage, a piece between too much and never enough. This explores the roots of trauma and ways to overcome it, focuses on faces of racial violence and victims made into one. The one on the bottom left, this artist is called Sydney Jasmine Colby. She's a Bohemian mixed media collage artist. Her work focuses on her identity, how it affects her family members, and her ancestors. These are photographs of herself and members of her family exploring their actions and personality traits and how it affects her own environment. Deborah Roberts, that's the one in the bottom, in the middle. She's an African-American mixed media collage artist, and her work addresses issues related to being visible, gender, self-actualization, including consequences of Jim Crow racism on children and experiences of Black boy joy. Materials used include magazines, internet, and paint. And the one on the bottom right, her name is Shadia Salamani. This work is called Ghostwriter. She is an Iranian American mixed media artist and activist. Her work focuses on retracing her parents' political exile from Iran and the route and travels to the US in the 80s, who uses photography and collage work. Next. The image on the bottom right, his name is Guadalupe Marvilla. He's a visual artist, and he uses art and the sound of drumming to represent intergenerational trauma. This piece is called Diseased Throwers, and it is about the trauma of being diagnosed with colon cancer and his childhood journey to the US alone at 8 years old, escaping the war in El Salvador. Kara Walker, the work is she is an American contemporary painter, and she uses silhouettes. That image is on the top left. She also uses printmaker, installation, film, and she's also a filmmaker and a professor who explores race, gender, sexuality, violence, and identity in her artwork. Rick Bartu, that is on the top right. He's a Vietnam vet and Indigenous artist, and he's part of the Mad River Band of the Wyatt tribe. This piece is about PTSD from the war, personal history, and cultural heritage. On the bottom left is Mira Shibuya. This work focuses on healing intergenerational trauma of the uh, war, World War II. It focuses on incarceration through art. It's a mural that visualizes the histories of three Pacific Northwest Japanese American families. There are three different families that are participated in dialogues, interviews, and the conversations focuses on their ancestry and stories of incarceration. They also shared their story of immigration, cultural assimilation, and cultural reclamation. Part of this is also, I wanted, next slide, please, um, is to focus on doing an art collage activity. These are prompts that I have used with some of the clients and patients and other individuals that I've worked with. And I wanted them to focus on what it would look like to heal from the trauma and how would they honor their ancestors. And on one side, do what it would look like to heal from a trauma and what it looks like when it's repeated, when trauma is repeated in the family. Some examples that I have here. This one includes what it looks like to heal from the trauma and what it looks like to still be in trauma. Some of the trauma that my clients have also faced and discussed was dealing with cancer and what that looks like in their family and how it looked like to heal. And this is a cancer piece. This is their representation. This is another one of what it looks like in their family and their culture. Red is very symbolic in their Asian culture, and they wanted to share that and how it looks to communicate and relocate from one place to the next. One did what looks like trauma on one side, the past and currently, and this is how it looks like when it's represented. Someone also showed trauma on one side and on the next. These are symbolic. So I did prompts and I asked them to use collage, magazines. It's very important that when you are doing work, that you use images that are important for you. There's no wrong way. And this is why I asked and I incorporate different materials. Magazines is not the only material that I've asked. I've also encouraged using textured materials, postcards. And these prompts, they're mostly paintings and images and magazines, and words mean a lot. Someone used resistance, but these are very symbolic. So the reflective questions, next slide, please. How do you think your own trauma affected how you interact in your daily life? How do you think your intergenerational trauma affects you in the community? And when you look in your community, what do you see that reminds you that the community is still dealing with trauma? Next slide. Now that we've come to an end, I kindly ask if you can please scan the QR code Your feedback and thoughts are important. So please complete. I apologize for the disruptance in the presentation. Next slide. List of references that I've incorporated as along with a list of artists that were part of the presentation. Once again, please use the QR code for today's presentation. Thank you.